What if I could cut in half the amount of time that it took you to build AI agents, AI automations within n8n? Would that save you an hour a week, maybe 5 hours a week, maybe 10 hours a week? Today, I'm going to show you 19 tips, tricks, hacks, which will dramatically increase your productivity within n8n. Some are going to be pretty basic, some are going to be much more advanced, but let's get straight into it. So here we are within n8n, and the very first one is going to be using Open Router. Essentially what this does here is it means that rather than having to connect up with different APIs or even create different accounts with different API providers to try out their AI, you can simply create one account with this company called Open Router, and you can use a load of models directly through them. You can see here, I can, from within one AI model node, I can select loads of different models from any OpenAI models you can see here to ones that I'm not really even aware of. We've got Perplexity, we've got Quen, we've got whatever this is here. I haven't actually heard of that one. We've got Grok, we've got Grok 4, just all of them here, and it's super easy to just change between them. You even have access to some of the more advanced stuff, like being able to change like the sampling temperature or the response format or maximum number of tokens, things like this. This is an awesome help when I want to change between these different models rather than having to have lots of different models connected up. And it means that when new models come out, I don't have to go and create new credentials, then change them here. And then if I delete an API token, then I have to change it here. It makes it just super quick and easy dealing with anything AI by using the Open Router chat model. Okay, our number 2 is using the import curl button within an HTTP request. Essentially what this means is that we do not have to write out any of the information within an HTTP request. We can simply use this button here. What this does is turn curl, which is a format which is very, very commonly used when expressing an HTTP request or an API call, and it allows you to essentially just import that API call. So if we go to OpenAI, of course, and we have a look up here, we can see here that this is a very, very basic API call to GPT 4.1. And you can see that it is in curl. So all we're going to do is copy this. We come back to n8n, and all we'll do is click on import curl. And if I just paste that in, click import, then it imports all of this HTTP request, this API call, into here. So we don't need to fill in any of this ourselves. Now, this is a fairly basic one, so not a lot is actually filled in. It's not saving that much time. But when you're dealing with much more complex API call, this saves just so much time and headache in terms of dealing with, even if you know what's going on with API calls and HTTP requests, this I still find saves a lot of time. Now, you do still have to change some things, such as, I would take out this here, or you put in your own API key, or you can change it to a header auth up here. This will allow you to set up API calls much, much quicker. Okay, and now on to the next one, which is where maybe you have an HTTP request, but it's not in curl, so you can't just import it. What you can do, and what I do very often, is I find my HTTP request, such as one here from XAI. It's in JavaScript. I'm not super familiar with HTTP requests in JavaScript, so what I'm going to do is simply copy this in JavaScript, and I'm going to come over to ChatGPT, and I'm going to say, convert this HTTP request from JavaScript into curl, paste it in, and in a couple of seconds, it's going to give me the curl for this HTTP request. So here we are, and this is now in a format which not only do I understand better, but also I can simply copy this. I can come back over to n8n, open this up, go import curl, and you can't paste JavaScript straight in here, but since we've converted it to curl, we can paste it in there, click on import, and then we can see that all of these have been brought in. And again, all you have to change is your API key in this scenario. And all of these bits here have been brought in from this here, where we've converted the JavaScript into curl. So this is a massive help if you are dealing with API documentation where it does not have curl for some reason, some of them don't, and you need to convert it into curl so you can import it into n8n without doing any actual work, just what we like. Okay, so now on to number 4. And before we go any further, let me just say, if you want more help with n8n or applying AI to your business in a more generic sense, come on over to the free Applied AI Club. This is the community I have where I help almost 1,000 people absolutely for free apply AI to their business or their clients' businesses, not just waffle on about AI or the latest models or even about n8n, but actually how is it applied to businesses. You can click the link in the description, come on over, join, it's free, and there's loads of stuff in here and community stuff and discussions and all that sort of good stuff. Have a look, and I'll see you in there. Anyway, back to it. Number 4 is again in relation to API calls. And sometimes if you're running a lot of items, a lot of iterations, you're going to come up against rate limits where you can't call an API loads and loads of times. How do we get around this? Well, rather than sequentially running a n8n flow like you normally would. So let's run this actually, and we're going to see that once we retrieve information from this Google Sheet, there's going to be a number of different items. So we've got 40 items, 40 rows in a sheet. Normally, it would, if you wanted to do an HTTP request, you would have to do that all at once. And if you had, let's say, 500 items here, then you might reach a rate limit depending on the API. However, if you put it in within a loop, and then within the loop, add a wait for a second, or it doesn't even need to be a second, it's going to spread out these requests, meaning that you're not going to hit that rate limit. Now, this is going to be a little bit slower. However, it's going to allow you to actually use the API with a large amount of items rather than hitting a rate limit over and over again, which obviously is not what we want. Number 5 is all about solving errors, especially with HTTP requests. You can see that I've done all of the APIs, all of the HTTP requests first, and you will quite often see, most likely, if you execute an HTTP request, sometimes when you're setting it up or when you're passing information in, you're going to get back this. JSON parameter needs to be valid JSON, and you have a look through here, and perhaps it's more complicated than this, and you think, oh, what's going wrong here? And very simple way is simply copy and paste this, go over to your AI of choice and say, what is wrong about this JSON? Paste it in, and it will tell you what is wrong. And also, whilst we're waiting for that, any errors that you get, simply copy and paste it all, or take a screenshot, put that into OpenAI as well, or Claude, or whatever you want to use, and it's going to give you a load more information about where the error is. Super simple, but I see a lot of people having issues here and not knowing how to debug the error details that it gives you. Simply throw it into AI. And you can see here, it says there is a missing quotation mark around the URL. Okay, so we go back over here and we have a look here. So, yes, we are missing a quotation mark. Let's add that in, execute that, give it a second, and then it will come back. And yeah, Grok 4 is actually really slow, so it's going to take a while, but you can see it's executing, it's not failing straight away. I promise you that's going to work now. Okay, so moving on from number 5. Okay, so 6 and 7 are all about time. Time is super important if you're doing anything with, let's say, like calendars or appointments or anything like that. You're going to use it all the time. And the thing to point out here is that AI models do not have an inherent sense of time. Some of them do nowadays, like with Grok 4, but most of them don't. So if I open up this chat and say, let's close that, which famous people have their birthdays today. Now, it won't know what today is, so it's probably going to give me the wrong answer. Today is the 22nd of July, so it'll probably tell me that it is a different date. Yep, here we go. So famous people born on October the 5th are these people. Obviously, today is not October the 5th. So what we can do is go in here into the AI agent, and within the system message, we always want to put in the current time date is, and then we're going to make sure this is an expression. And we'll go open curly brackets, 2 of them, and we'll go $now, and we'll just put that in. Now you can see the format is going to be a little bit funky, as it's going to be like the full time stamp. I don't think time stamp's the right word, but it's going to be the full time, right? You could reformat that in a different way, but usually it's never an issue. If we then save this and run this again, in fact, let's clear that and then run it again. It's going to know that today is the 22nd of July, so when it gives us an answer, it's going to give us people's birthday on the 22nd of July, not whatever date AI think it is. It's been pretty slow, but there we go. July 22nd, who have we got? John D, Marilyn Monroe. Don't really know who any of those are. I know who Marilyn Monroe is. But anyway, there we go. So that is number 6. Number 7 is equally as important because, especially when dealing with calendar events, it's not just the time, the day and the time that matter, but also the time zone. And if you're self-hosting, which we'll talk about in a second, depending on where you're hosting your instance of n8n, the time zone can be wrong. So going up here and pressing the 3 dots, you can go into settings, and you can see here, once we give it a second, it says default America, New York. Now I'm not in New York at the moment, or that time zone, so it's going to give me incorrect information. If I come down here and say, what is the time? And it's going to come back, and it's probably going to tell me that it's like 9 a.m. There we go, 8:16 a.m., which is incorrect. So if I go up here and go settings, and I go on London, because that's where I am at the moment, and select that and go save, And then I believe you have to reload the workflow. Now, if I run this again and say, what is the time? We should see that it's going to say about 1:15. So there we go. The time is about 1:15, 1:17. So there we go. That's really super important, especially if you're using anything to do with calendars. If this is not correct, it's going to throw off all your calendar stuff. And this has to be applied to each different workflow, unfortunately. Maybe there's something in the settings, but I haven't seen it myself. Okay, so now we're moving on to number 8. This one here, number 8, is really important as it's to do with handling errors. No matter how good you are always going to get errors in your workflows sometimes. And what is important is not that there's no errors, because again, it's impossible, but that we are handling errors correctly. That means we know about them, and perhaps you're doing something to allow the workflow to still run even if there's errors. Now, the best way to do this is to choose the areas which are most likely to fail. These are often going to be things like HTTP requests. These are things such as like tools. You want to click into them and you want to go settings, and on error, it will usually be set to stop workflow. You can change this either to continue, which may cause some errors still if it's relying upon information from this step, which is failing, or you can go continue using the error output. And when you click on this, you're going to see that you now have 2 outputs. You have success, which is going to do whatever normally happens when this works normally, and then you have error. And you can set up whatever you want to happen in this error flow. You can set up some smart stuff so that AI interprets the error results and tries to change some of it. But in this example, all I'm doing is sending a message to myself on Telegram saying, hey, this is broken, so that as soon as there's an issue, I know there's an issue and I know with which workflow. So let's connect this up. I know there is an issue with this HTTP request, so I know it's going to go wrong. Let's go execute workflow. And there we go. It has failed successfully and it sent a message on Telegram. And I can have a look over on Telegram and see these are previous ones that I tested. There's been an error with your API call. The workflow is n8n hacks. And if we go back, we can see that is the message that we set up here. And you can obviously change this to include whatever information that you want. But this is super important as you are always going to have errors, and it's important that you catch them and deal with them properly. Okay, let's now talk about this one over here, which is all about pinning data and using mock data. So there are going to be some processes which take a lot of time. This one doesn't take too long. Let's execute this. You can see that when we execute it, it's going to take a little while for us to get back all of the information from Google Sheets. Actually, that wasn't too bad, but you can imagine if there were like 500 items, it's going to take more and more time. Every time that we run this automation, especially when we're testing, it's going to take up a lot of time to collect all of those like 500 items. So what we can do is we can click in here, and if we already have information in here, such as, if there are ticks there to show that an automation has worked, we can click into it, and this button up here we can use to pin data. What this means is that this is not actually going to run anymore when we execute it. It's simply going to use the information from this previous execution. And we can execute workflow, and you can see it's going to, I'm not getting the spinny things. Let me reload. Oh, there we go. Let me reload just to see the spinny things. Okay, let's execute workflow, and you can see, oh, it's still not really working. Must be a problem. But there we go. This happens much, much quicker. And that is because we are not actually using this API call to go and get things from Google Sheets. We are just using the data that was already there. Another thing that we can do is we can edit this information here. So if we click on edit, then we can see this is all the information that we pinned. However, I can get rid of some of these if I only want to run it with 10, because perhaps I'm calling an AI thing later on and I don't want to call all 40 in the test. I only want 10 or 8. Did I take away? Oh well, that should be fine. Which means that when I run it, we're now running with only 8 items, which means that if we're doing something later on, it's happening with less information. We can also go in here, click on edit, and we can change one of these questions to something else, so that when it goes through, we're testing different information. This means we don't have to always make API calls to get the information that we want. We can just push it in there ourselves. Number 10 is a variation on this. You can go into the executions and you'll see, once it loads, all of your previous executions. And then what you'll be able to do here is if we select one, let's use this example where we were using this agent here. What we can do is click this copy to editor, and that's going to essentially copy all of those values from that execution into the editor. So if we come over here, we can see this now looks like it's walked through, and we can see that this is pinned, which means that we can go in and we can look at all of this information here as if it was when that execution ran. This is really good for fault finding. If you select an execution which failed, you can see all the information passed in. You can then make changes to it and see that it would then work after the changes that you make, which essentially allows you to properly correct issues as they appear. Okay, so moving on to number 10, and a quick note here, once you have pinned data, you will have to go in and unpin it, and then you'll be able to use it as normal again. So number 11 is all about using the agent logs. So if I use this, and this is going to book in something in my calendar, and I'm going to say, set a meeting for me today at 4 p.m. called test. I'm going to send that off, and we're going to see it's going to go and speak to Google Calendar. Yeah, these spinny things, what spinnies don't seem to be working that well today. There we go. And it's going to set something in my calendar. However, if I look at my calendar, we're going to see that not only does it not have a title, but it's at the wrong time. So what I can do is I can go in here and I can have a look through the logs here. This is what we see here, the logs. When we click on the AI agent, we have the logs. And what we have on the right-hand side, and this might change depending on when you're watching this, n8n might switch it around, you can see both the inputs and the outputs at every stage. So here, we can see when it's interacting with simple memory, we can see when it's speaking to AI, and in our case, that's through OpenRouter. And we can see, okay, where's the problem gone on? Let's have a look at the Google Calendar, and we can see the input and the output. So we can have a look at the output. We can see that within the Google Calendar node, we can see what's happening here. We can see that the start time is wrong, the end date is wrong, and that the title is also wrong. So that allows us to tell where the issue is happening. This isn't probably the most fantastic version, but when you have a really big model or agent or automation, this really helps in being able to see, okay, where is it going wrong? It's passing through the right information here, but when it's coming to Google Calendar, it's not using that right information, and that's where it's going wrong. So we can click into this and we can see, okay, the issue is somewhere here. Here I can see we're not setting the start time, not setting the end time, and we're not setting the summary. And we can set the summary there, and then we can go through and run that again, and we'll see that that then works. But using these logs here, once you click on the AI agent and clicking around here and using the input and the output side of things, allows you to see what's going on. So if we click into Google Calendar, we can also see that we can view the information in different formats just by clicking these buttons here. So that's a really good way to see what's going wrong when something is going wrong with AI agents. Okay, staying on the topic of AI agents, a really big one, which is super important, is a structured output parser. So let me connect this up. So when you use an AI agent, there is an option here called require specific output format. Now, you might want to use this if you're using AI to summarize something, but then you want specific output fields, or you want JSON. So you can then go and pass that into, let's say, an API call, because you want AI to do some work in between getting information, doing something with it, and then passing it off to another API. So you might want JSON as an output because perhaps the API needs the, whatever you're sending it in a specific format. And the way to do that is to turn this on. And then what you're going to see, let me delete this, is this new tool here called Output Parser. Well, it's not really a tool, but it's a new section, right? You want to click on that and you have different options. The one you want to use a lot of the time is the Structured Output Parser. Now, there are several different options here. This is probably the best one, which is you give it an example of the output of information that you want, and then it will use that example to stick to it, and AI will use that example to create, the outputs from then on. You could also actually define it, which is going to give you a more accurate output that is more reliable. But as you can see, it's a little bit like messier or more complicated. This works every time for me, so why make it more complicated, right? So what's going on here? Okay, let's bring that over here. It's given us this. So let's say, it's important to note the information here is not the information that's going to be used. This is just an example. So that you can see that the schema is state, which is going to be one string, and then cities, which is going to be a list of strings. So I can say in here, let's restart this. I can say, what is the most eastern US state, and what are the most populated cities in that state? I can send that off, and what that's going to do is that it's going to give me that information in that specific output. So you can see here, there we have it, Alaska, and the most populated cities are these ones here. And you can obviously change this to whatever format that you want in order to do whatever you want with it. But really useful tool. A lot of people try and not use this, and they just try and ask the AI agent to just give it to me in JSON. this worked much, much better, I promise you. Okay, the next one we're coming on to is back to HTTP requests. Let's close this. And this is using credentials. So you'll see that previously what I did, rather than have the API key in the header as like an auth, authorization, and then bearer, and then whatever the key is, I've used a authentication type, generic credential type. And then I have used the header auth. This is the one that you probably want to use most of the time because most API calls use like the header authentication, where it's authentication, bearer, and then your API token. And how you'd set that up within this format here is by clicking on generic credential type, then header auth, and then you will want to create new credential, and you simply type in, oops, that hasn't worked, authorization, and then down here you would type in bearer, and then whatever your token is with a space in the middle. Let me talk about why you would do this, right? You also want to rename it. That's very important that you rename it. Why would you want to do this? There are several reasons why you would want to do this. If you are sharing workflows like I am often with you guys, then you can see all of those in the community if you want to see any of the workflows that I'm sharing. It makes it safe to share. Otherwise, I'll be sharing my API key for everything that I use, and that'll be pretty insecure because I'm sure one of you pesky guys will come and steal my API key. This way, it's safe. It also means that if I change my API key, rather than having to go through every single HTTP request or whichever node I'm using that API token in, I can simply just come in here and click on this to open it up. Get rid of that. And I can simply just change this and it will change everywhere. So it means that when your API token changes, it's much quicker and also it's much safer if you ever share anything. So those are some really good reasons why this is a much, much better idea than going headers and then going authorization or however you spell it and putting it in there. This is a much better way to do it. So let's talk about the next one, which is not like a little workflow that I can show you, but perhaps one of the biggest hacks, and that is self-hosting your n8n instance rather than using n8n itself, like the n8n hosted version. So if we go to n8n's website, we can see here that these are the plans at the moment at recording this. They're pretty expensive. It's 100% worth it, but why pay this money if we don't need it? Now, you may want some things like the global variables are actually very, very useful, but I don't use them. What I use instead, I self-host with Render. I have it over here, and you can see this is just the hosting for my n8n instance, and I pay $7 a month. That is it. That is cheaper than any of the n8n plans, and I get unlimited everything. And I can choose to scale it up when I want to scale it up. If I need more speed, more processing power, I can choose to do that. If you want a tutorial on how you can do this yourself, click down below. I'm sure I will post a link to my video on that down below. You can use loads of other stuff. It doesn't have to be Render. That's just what personally I like the best. It also means that you are not hosting information on n8n servers. So if you are trying to run something which has to have some level of security, it's going to be better to do that because you can self-host on an instance on a server where it's secure, like perhaps like Amazon EC2 servers. That's fine for your use case or your governing body. So you might want to use it for that reason. But I would highly, highly recommend self-hosting. It doesn't just save you money, but it means you have more control. Okay, so back to n8n, and let's look at actual things we can do. And this one here is one that I struggled with for a while, and that is usually if you are accessing a binary file, which means like an actual file and the actual data itself, not a reference to a file, but the actual file and its data itself, usually you can only access that file, that binary file, from the step before. So what I've got here is I'm using Google Drive to download an image which is on my Google Drive. I'm then doing something which doesn't include this binary file here, right? So in this example, I'm translating the title of the file to Italian. I'm not sure why I'd want to do this, but this is a placeholder for anything else you want to put in here. But then on this step over here, I want to use this file over here. However, if I click into this, let me connect it up first. And if we look into this, we can see that for the data, I can't access the binary file. On this step here, I have this section called binary file because it's coming from the step immediately before. But because this is the next one on, we don't have that binary section here. So usually I would have to re-download this file. So now I'm downloading it twice, once to get the name and then once to get the file itself, which is very inefficient. But there is a better way to do it using this code block here. So let me disconnect this and let's put this in here. And essentially what this code block does is it references the Google Drive node and returns essentially the binary item. So if I execute this, we can see that passed through to the next step. Here on the output is that binary file, which means here we don't have to re-download it. We've just downloaded it once and we're referencing it. We can open this up and we've got a binary file, and then we can use data as the name of that binary file in order to do this thing, which we're re-uploading with the different name. Not sure why you want to do that. However, there are lots of use cases that I've used where I don't want to have to re-download this file twice, but I do want to use it in 2 different places within a workflow. So that's number 15. Let's look at number 16 on the list. Number 16 is a bit of a boring one, but very, very important. So I used to be a developer, and the worst thing was when you were given a code base of someone else, work that someone else has made, but they've got no comments in there, so you've got no idea what is happening in their code. This, even though we're not coding anything on n8n, this is still a problem, right? If you're working on a solution which someone else has worked upon, or you're working on a solution which someone else is going to work upon, or you're creating a solution which you're going to come back to several months later, it's a really, really good idea to put in notes for yourself or for other people or for clients using the sticky note side of things. A lot of people don't do this because they think, it's just me, I'm going to be using it, no one else is going to be using it, doesn't really matter. I guarantee there will be some occasions where you think, damn, I wish I put some notes in. And there are also things you can do with the sticky notes. You can format information in lots of different ways. As you can see, if we double click into it, these are the different ways that you can format stuff. You can use the different number of hashtag symbols in order to do different levels of headings. You can use bold and italic, asterisk symbol. You can add links, so you can link out to different things, such as API documentation. If you're using an API that you don't often use, rather than having to fish around, if you want to go back and edit it, rather than having to go and find the documentation and the part of the documentation, you can simply link it in here so that when you come back to edit it, or when someone else edits it, they can just click that. And it's very, very simple. So reasons why you might want to do this is you can explain what you're doing either to yourself, future you, to your team, to clients, or future you. You can link to external resources such as API documentation. You can add in reminders to say, hey, come back and improve this, or this has got a security fault. We need to make sure we fix this before we push it live. It's also good for separating key areas and processes, saying, right, this blue area over here where I can change the color of this, I can change it to blue. This blue area is about the input, this green area is about the processing, and this red area is about the outputs, or you could make the red area about the error handling. It just makes it a little bit easier for people to understand. Bit of a boring one, but I promise you is important when you're doing this at scale or with a team, or if you've got lots of automations within your business. Number 17 is along a similar sort of vein, and that is using tags. So tags are fantastic for sorting your automations. Again, once you get to a certain level, you will have a lot of automations and it'll be hard to find the ones which you want. There are lots of different strategies that you can use with tags, but one thing that I like to do is to tag the different tools that you use, which means that if you ever need to update something to do with VAPI, let's say, you can make sure that you tag all of the workflows that use VAPI with the tag VAPI. And then when you need to find them, you can simply go into the back end and you can go here and you can go sort by tags, go VAPI, and then you can see that only the ones appear which have VAPI. So I can go in here and I can have a look and change whatever I need to, or perhaps I want to swap VAPI for a better version that comes out later. And you can see I've also tagging Airtable and Google Calendar in here as well. It's one way you can use tags. I would highly recommend using tags to organize your automations, which brings us on to number 19, which again is a similar point, using the folders. Now, this will be in your personal space. You'll be able to click on use folder or create folder, and then you can create a folder for whatever you want, and you can put folders within folders. So if I go, let's go here, you can see I've got different folders within folders, which really help, let's go back, to separate what I'm doing, rather than just having a long list of all of my automations, which sucks. I can really put them into folders and make it much, much easier to know what's going on, which once you have more than like 10 different automations, 10 different workflows, this is going to be really useful. Again, it's a boring thing, but I promise you it's worth spending like 20 seconds per automation doing. The last one, which is probably the biggest time saver of them all, is building modularly. Modularly? I think that's the word. Building in modules, right? Having different modules to what you're doing. So let me connect this up and explain what I mean. So building modularly means that rather than building everything again every time you need it, you are going to build in sections. So for example, I am going to want to interact with my calendar in lots of different scenarios. Rather than creating a new calendar agent every single time that I want to interact with my calendar, what I can do is create a workflow here. Now, this is a sub workflow. I can run it in the same workflow because there's only one, but ideally I'll put this in a separate workflow. And it means that whenever I want to interact with my calendar, instead of having to create this here every time, which would take 5 minutes or so, I can just use my calendar agent and connect to it on whatever this agent here is, right? So this is what I'm trying to do right now, and this is the modular part. And it means that rather than having to build out this, I can simply just call this tool and then connect it up here, and I can call this workflow here. And once you pick up some speed and you start building more and more automations and you start doing more and more things, you're going to build up like a library of different modular bits. You have agents which interact with your calendar, you can have it interact with your emails, you can have it interact with your CRM for your business, and then you can use these wherever in your automations to make your life so much easier. I'm not going to talk about exactly how you set up everything modularly. It's not that difficult, but if you do want some information, come on over to the free Applied AI Club, and you can have a helping hand over there. That is number 19. That is the last one. This is probably the most important one, or the one that you can save the most amount of time using, and that is making things modular. It's going to save a lot of time. So those are my 19 tips, tricks, hacks to n8n, things that I wish I knew sooner when working with n8n, which currently save me a lot of time, and if I had used sooner, would have also saved me a lot of time, a lot of heartache, a lot of things going wrong and not knowing why they went wrong. If you want more help with n8n, with applying AI within a business, your business or clients' businesses, come on over to the Applied AI Club. Link is in the description. You can apply for free or you can join for free. If you've liked this video, please do give it a like. Subscribe if you want to see more videos like this, and I will see you in the next one. Bye-bye.